Hi guys, this is Niman Kenkre for BlueFirePoker.com, and for today's video we are going to play some 50 cent a dollar, and the very first hand I get is pocket aces. Nice way to start. So I'll just come right out 3-betting that. So I think it's been a while since I've made a video at this limit. If I even have, I can't remember now. If I have, it's been a long time. So hopefully this will be a limit that you guys are interested in watching me play, and hopefully I'll get pocket aces every single hand. I do get called. We'll continue betting that flop, of course. Pretty innocuous flop. Expect to get occasionally floated, occasionally bluffed at, and certainly called by any pocket pair. He does re-raise. I don't know whether I should just go ahead and ship it now. That looks a little bit more bluffy, maybe. Plus, he may be more inclined to call with like a hand like tens, or just call. I think calling legitimizes my range. I think I'm going to go ahead and ship it. And he calls in pocket tens. What a way to start the session. That literally was the first hand that I've played. So, if I could run like this all the time. Table 3 has broken down to 3-handed before I even got rolling. So I'll keep playing there as long as it's 3-handed. If it breaks down to heads up, I'll see if I can find another table. So I guess I don't have any reads on any of these players. Haven't played with any of them before. Nobody looks familiar. I'll check back my pair of threes here. I have ace king now on table 3. And on this board, I don't think I have enough equity to even call once with a flop pair here, so I'll just fold it. We have a limp. I'm going to make a larger than usual raise here with my ace king. Make it hopefully look like I was just trying to steal the limp pot or the posted pot, whichever it was. I didn't notice if he had actually just posted early or not. And I will call this open with the ace-4 suited on table 3. Flop nothing on an action flop, and just check with the intention of folding. And even when it checks through, I still don't have a profitable bluff here. Obviously 3-handed. The board works well with a lot of people's range, and I will just let it go despite the ridiculously small bet there on the turn. And he actually won the hand with 10-9, so I'm curious what the original opener called him with. Absolutely nothing, ace high. Pretty awful call there by Arches. I'm going to play a little more aggressively with the intention, with the hope that these players are not going to be as good. I mean, just based on what I just saw right here, at least here on table 3. So I think it'll be profitable for me to get involved. Just based on this first impression, the way these two players just played this last hand was pretty poor. So my first instinct is that I want to get involved in as many pots as possible against these players who will presumably not be playing well. So we'll see. I'll adjust my reads, of course, as they go along. 2-5 suited, bunch of crap here, but maybe worth a 3-bet steal here. If I do get called, I do have some deceptive playability to that hand. And if he was paying attention the last time I 3-bet, I had pocket aces, so maybe I'll have a little more credibility because of that as well. And I just pick it up. I'm in an aggressive mood. No particular reason, so I might be playing a little more aggressively. Without, I mean, don't worry, it's not going to be in a way that I'm going to spew or play poorly, but just start playing a little bit more aggressive style. I don't think I have a profitable c-bet on this board against a player that calls my open. I think a lot of times he's going to have something that he can continue with here, and I, of course, will never have a profitable second barrel, which should always be one of your considerations when you decide whether to fire once. Consider whether you're going to have a profitable second barrel, whether you can pick up backdoor equity, and so on. And in this case, no card can really help me on the turn if I get called, and I would be flying blind, flying a second barrel, so that should be a consideration when deciding just to check back the flop. So I just made a couple of hand history videos. Those will probably be released to the site before this one is, so I guess I won't talk about them. Hopefully you've seen them and liked them. I'm going to call Queen Jack suited here on the button, and I'm going to make a call with my pocket tens as well. Both pretty standard. And I flop top set. God, I'm running good. Pocket jacks on table 4. And when he bets, let's see, do I want to raise here? Or should I wait for the turn? I think the board is drawy enough that if he has anything, I may be able to successfully represent a draw, so I will go ahead and raise it right away. And I will donk lead here with my jacks. I don't know, with the tens, I guess he's going to have a spot where he's going to fire second barrel a lot of the time, so maybe I should have just called. Any overcard to the 10 is either going to make his hand or at least appear to be a profitable double barreling spot. So maybe my check raise there was premature. I just decided that I would be able to, I want to be able to play the draws hard on those draw heavy boards, and for reasons of balance, that may be something for me to do. The queen isn't too relevant after being called here. I do have the jacks, which are blockers to jack 10, so I think I have enough that I can fire again here. I would expect to get raised by a better hand on the flop, so unless he floated me with some kind of queen 10 type of hand, I expect to still be ahead and can still continue betting this for value. I'm talking about table 4, of course. Now he does raise me. I don't love that. He may have been slow playing an 8. However, I'm not going to fold to this min raise. And the flush gets there, which should freeze him up and get me to showdown, unless he has me beaten, so I can comfortably fold here. He did actually flop trips. So, a very strange way to play it. And again, a draw heavy board, he probably should have raised right away. And then when the straight got in to make a min raise in that spot is pretty silly. I don't like the way he played it. But anyway, getting back to my set of tens, my top set hand, my idea was the board was so drivey. I think it was 10-5-4, 10-4-3 with a flush draw, that if he had anything, he's gonna be quick to put me on a draw because it just doesn't make sense as a. I mean, there's so many more draws that I would play hard there than nut type hands. So I don't expect him to fold anything, any kind of pair or anything, even a hand like pocket eights or something like that. On the other hand, I think I probably should have called because the nature of the board was such that a lot of cards would come with which he would fire a second time, whether he actually had a hand or not. So I think in retrospect, I probably should have waited, especially given that I had top set, which makes it less likely that he had top pair. I probably should have just called and then waited for the turn to drop the hammer. I don't know if this Rivi Chico is going to be the kind of player who's going to call with ace high. If so, this is obviously a poor continuation bet for me. Same thing that I was talking about before, where I will never have a profitable second barrel. Get a good flop here on table 3 as I flop the nut flush draw, ace over card, and a gut shot straight draw. And on table 1 I flop top pair and we'll call the bet. And when he checks, I'm going to bet here on the turn as value / protection, but I'm not putting any more money in the pot no matter what happens. Because when he calls here, I think that his river calling range is going to have me beat. And that's an interesting play here for him. All right, so here on table 3, I bet the flop and was called. I'm going to just check now on the turn. Probably call a bet if he bets. This is really interesting. I'm thinking that I'm probably beat here. This is a close spot, but I'm going to let it go. It's hard to think of a hand that he would play this way. Seems kind of silly if he would play, ace of clubs X this way. So I'm going to just let it go. Here I will call the bet. The king, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So if I'm beat, it's with a thin-ish value bet with a 9 or pocket 8. He's betting again, which I'm not thrilled about. I think I am beat probably more often than not here now on table 3, but not enough to decline an overlay of 10 to win 42. So I will call this, expecting to be beat more often than not. And I wasn't expecting him to play ace queen that way. I do get 3-bet with ace king. Pretty standard, I think, for me to come back over here with a 4-bet. I think maybe my sizing is a little weird. I maybe should have made it less, but I don't want to give him a profitable call if he's doing this with some kind of like queen 10 suited type of hand. It sort of puts him in a shove or fold situation. So yeah, so this is obviously, it's maybe not a horrible play, but it's not a good one in this case for the opponent to. It's just not, with no equity except for his overcards. He probably shouldn't be calling that flop bet. Once he does call the flop bet, the turn bet is okay, but once I call on the turn, he's not really going to get a fold, especially not to a 1/3 bet. If he wants to bluff the river, he needs to make a bigger bet. So, and I would have actually folded. His hand did make sense to me, as well, I didn't think I was ahead. I thought he might have been value betting a hand like ace 9. Like the king really doesn't make a lot of sense, but unless maybe it's possible that he had king of spades, X of spades, which would make a lot of sense actually. But the thing is, value bets. There's not a lot of value bets in that hand that made a lot of sense. At the same time, there's not a lot of bluffs that made sense with that kind of sizing either. At the end of the day, he was offering me such an overlay. Betting 2 into 10. I'll just call again. And maybe now I'll make a little value bet here on the end. I think maybe he might have a jack or something like this. Let's bet a small amount that will be called by a jack. And when he raises, I'm going to give him credit. It's a big raise. I think he has 7-6 here a lot. It's a big raise. I don't expect to see something like that as a bluff in this spot. So it's one of these situations. One of the things that I urge you guys, a lot of times when you do your analysis, you look, you're trying to decide on a river call, and you look and think about whether a bluff or a value bet makes sense from your opponent's standpoint. And if it doesn't, then you do the opposite. Like if a bluff doesn't make sense, then you make a call. I mean, if a bluff doesn't make sense, you make a fold, or a value bet doesn't make sense, you make a call. But it's important to first of all consider the overlay, because if you're getting 4-1, then you only need to be right 20% of the time. You have 20% confidence that you're right. And the second thing is, don't stop your analysis at one side of it. If you see that a bluff doesn't make sense, well then okay, now he must be value betting. But then think to yourself, if a value bet makes sense. And it's possible that you'll find that neither really makes a lot of sense, and then you can base your decision more, center your decision a little more, if you know what I mean. So this FWAP character is advertising kevinfwap.com on the site. I think I'm going to make a 3-bet here on table 2 with my 7-6. It's obviously a crap hand, but has some playability. I'll check again with my 9s here. And I would have value bet the river if the river was less than a 9, but on a 10, I think he's going to call me if he has any kind of 10 and not call me with worse. He does call the 3-bet, but it's a pretty good one for me to continuation bet. And let's see here what I got called. And against the 9s, I was against pocket 5s. And he calls. I don't have any equity in the hand. I guess I'm probably going to just... the jack does probably put a second overcard if he has a pocket pair. I think I have enough equity to try it again. If he's got a king, he's going to call me. But I think at this point he may fold a hand like pocket 9s or so. I would not have fired that second barrel if the jack was some lower card. And now I'm going to check the river. The fact that I made a pair really has nothing to do with anything. I just don't think, when he calls twice, I think he has a king a lot of the time, and he's not going to, I don't think that he's going to fold. And a good flop for me. This is kind of interesting here, that he's shoving all in here. I actually almost want to call now, because if he's got a hand that he can shove in now, why didn't he do it on the turn with so many draws and stuff available? I'll squeeze Mr. Flop over here. This is really tempting, but I think it'll be a little bit spewy because I don't know anything about the player. But against some players, this would be a reasonable call, just because you would think that if they have a hand that they can shove, that the raise would have come earlier in the hand. So, but I'll let it go, but this is actually a closer decision than it might appear. Okay, so sorry, can't think of anything to say. I'm going to be playing this Queen Jack suited hand, obviously. And that will be by calling this fellow's open. Notice that the small blind is a very small stack. Something to keep in mind when playing this hand. I mean, now obviously it doesn't matter because I'm going to play, obviously call a c-bet or make a c-bet. Just something to notice when you pay attention in these situations. Here I will call a bet if he bets and bet if he checks. Pretty standard. Somebody asked about my background. Um, that was in my last video. I'm sorry I didn't actually respond to that comment. If that person that asked that is watching, this was actually the view from my hospital room just moments before my son was born 5 years ago. He was born in the morning, and it was not moments before, but while my wife was in labor, I took a photograph because it was a beautiful sunrise, and it's obviously a nostalgic day for me, and I use that as my background. A little bit of a light call there, obviously with 6-3 suited, but I'm just gonna assume that I can play it well in position. I could have 3-betted, or I could have just folded as well. All three of those are reasonable options. Aces in a couple of spots, always nice. And I got a walk here in the small blind. That wasn't any fun. With my other aces. Let's see what this guy shipped with. I guess it doesn't matter. He's gone now, but he had pocket sixes. Pretty standard chip for him, I guess. This guy who just sat down, Nuskai, I think he has the same avatar as ADZ, who's a frequent opponent of mine at the 10-20 games. So that threw me off for a second when I saw him sit down. It was ADZ playing down here. But it's just the avatar. So this has been a bad sports week for me, as my Gunners have been knocked out of 3 of the 4 competitions this week. But the league looks like it's going to come down to the wire between them and Manchester United. It's nice to have ace-king in this spot against the guy who, the last time we were in this spot, he had 3-bet me and I had 4-bet him. And it happens again. Perfectly set up now for him to make a light shove. This will also make it so that, well, I was going to say if you fold, yeah, I called it, didn't I? And that should just about end the hand. Yeah, that really set itself up well, because the very last time it folded to us in the blinds, I had opened the small blind. He 3-bet the big blind. I 4-bet. I had ace-king then as well, and he folded. So to have that happen once again, I really expected him to shove lightly. I didn't expect him to shove that lightly, but it just looks like I'm one of these guys that won't permit myself to be 3-bet, when in actuality I had the hand both times. In this spot, I don't even know if I should call this 1-bet here with my pocket eights. I don't think it plays very well equity-wise. I could be against something like pocket 5s or something like that, but even if I am, he's likely to fire it again. This is a situation where my hand, just even though there's a decent chance it's the best hand at the moment, if he fires again, I really can't profitably call. He could have made 2-pair set. I'm going to go ahead with this stack and raise the queen 10 here and play for it if he decides to go with it. And I will fold the 8s. And brick out and lose that hand. So yeah, the 8s is a hand. This is the kind of situation where I see people make a lot of mistakes. This is a situation where you get check raised, and it's a spot in which I see so many players call once and then fold to the next barrel. The problem is I'm either crushed, or he's probably got I'm either crushed or he's got some kind of reasonable equity against my hand most of the time. there's almost nothing that won't have some kind. I mean, I don't think he's going to play this way with ace six. So once again, I'm going to be calling off with ace king and getting people really donking off their money to me in bad spots. I haven't won this hand yet, but looks good so far. Ooh, I'm behind now. Yeah, he won that one. So another horrible play. I mean, it's this is one of these spots. Well, let me talk about the eights more. That's more important. So basically, this is one of the spots where you're not doing great equity wise. Usually, you may have the best hand, and so but you certainly don't have a good enough hand to call a second barrel. So I see a lot of people call a check raise in this spot, and then they fold to the turn barrel. But calling that check raise, knowing that the turn barrel's coming, more often than not, is pretty spewy, and you just lose that additional bet. And you really can't continue with the hand unless you turn an 8. And whether or not you're ahead, you're going to be whether or not you're ahead, you're going to be faced with a second barrel that you cannot call, because calling again would be extremely spewy in this spot. And he probably has more value hands than semi bluffs in this spot. So this is a spot you really should be folding until you come across the kind of player that that starts making this check raise in this spot with hands like king queen and stuff. Once you find that out and your hand becomes more of a prohibitive favorite, then you can start continuing and then making decisions. But against most players, when they check raise this, they're either going to have you beat or they're going to have decent equity against you, like a pair and a straight draw or something like that. And in those situations, you don't. It's not profitable even to call the first shell. Okay, so now that being said, the ace king hand is just a horrible play by Rivi Chico here. The fact of the matter is, I've talked a lot about how when you have hands like suited connectors, I think that you should be calling with them and not 3-betting in situations like this, because they play well post-flop. However, if you do decide that this is, and I think that's probably the MO of most players, so I'm not going to argue the point too violently. If you do decide that this is a squeezing spot, you have to let it go if you do get 4-bet. That's the very reason why I don't think that they should be squeezed, because they're hands that can play flops really well, and so you don't want to get blown off the hand with a 4-bet. That's why I believe that this is a hand that you should not be 3-betting. But it's not a terrible mistake to 3-bet something like this. But if you do, you have to be willing to fold it when you get 4-bet, because your equity is horrible if you shove and get called. The kind of hands that you want to maybe like shove bluff, like if you 3-bet but then get 4-bet and you suspect you're getting 4-bet light, are hands that will have some reasonable equity against a guy who's got a legitimate shove calling range. For example, ace X suited, because that's a hand that is going to have 30% equity against any hand except for pocket aces, and then has some reasonable non-zero equity even against pocket aces. But to do that with 6 high, I mean, if I'm doing it with like pocket jacks or something, he's completely dead. In this case, he happened to have his best situation, which is that 2 overcards to his 2 undercards. So keep that in mind when you decide to. All right, this one I'm getting check raised, potentially on a draw, but the problem is I'm not going to know which cards are good for me and which cards are not. So there's no point in waiting for a safe turn. I'm just going to go ahead and ship here. So this BS guy is kind of mad at me, I guess. I don't even remember winning a pot against him. Did I just win? Did I do something against him? Oh, he was the guy who bluffed me with his ace-queen. So for some reason he's pretty upset about that. And has turned me into a female, among other things, with her little something child. I guess I had long hair then. So this guy's sitting with a half stack and is 3-betting me. I'm trying to think whether to just go ahead and shove here, or call and play the flop. I think with this half stack, I'm just going to shove it. Part of the reason is one small read that he thought about calling before that. So one small read that he may be raising light is the fact that he raised and folded earlier on the ace-10-8 board. He check raised me, and then when I shoved on him, he folded. So especially considering he's in the button in this last hand, he could be doing it lighter than usual, which with a half stack, I think I can profitably shove eights there. In this case, he really did have a hand, of course, but I won the race. I think I'll try a squeeze here with my king 10 off. Not quite good enough to call here. May have some playability if called, and the fact, this is an important point too, the fact that the opponent has 120 big blinds, 125 big blinds, makes it a little bit harder for him to go back over and play for stacks with something light. It's, so that's another important consideration. Once I get called in both spots, I am not going to continue with it. Though I don't think a continuation bet here would have been terrible. But when they check to me again, I'm going to take a little stab. It's likely they both have pocket pairs. That doesn't mean that they're going to fold them, but it's worth a shot. And vague chance that my 10 might be good here. I hope he doesn't bet. I don't think I can call a bet here. It's kind of an unusually played hand by him, but I'm going to give him credit and let him have it here. This BSS guy wants to get me. Maybe I should have checked and let him bet into me, but I figure he'll call me down if he has a jack. for just a min raise, I will call with my king 5 suited on the button. The button is obviously very powerful. I wouldn't call this with in any other position. It's a pretty straightforward play of that hand, I guess. No reason to check that back. Obviously, you have to bet those when you're check two, if you're going to play those hands. So, little dry spell with nothing happening. And I will bet when check two as usual. Wow, this guy's table talk is really entertainment. I didn't even stack him. I just won a hand where he tried to bluff with ace queen that missed against my sevens, and or maybe he's talking to someone else now. Oh yeah, maybe he is talking to somebody else. I'm trying to think whether to call this re-raise. I think I will call it. It's a little bit thin, but a little bit of dead money in the pot. And not enough of a stack behind to float this with my gut shot and backdoor flush draw. I'll just let it go here. Oh, our entertainment has left the BSS guy. I did get check called on this flop. Turned a pair. Was probably not good, but I don't think this is a profitable barrel, so I'll just check back and hope to hit something. I don't. There is the off chance here that he had a missed flush draw. I was floating with ace high, but I don't think I can call this, especially when he called my raise from the small blind. I think he's going to be like sort of pocket pair heavy there a lot of the time, so I'll just let it go here. Sizing also makes me believe that he has it. I called a one bet here with my 10-8, pretty standard. Check on the turn. I don't think I can profitably bet that river, so I'll just check it again. He does bet it again, which is a little interesting. It's hard to imagine that he wouldn't bet a 9 or a flush draw again on the turn. You see, so a 9 would have bet again on the turn, and I think a flush draw would have fired a second barrel. So I actually think that he may be bluffing with a jack 10 or queen jack type of hand. So I'm going to go ahead and call this. Oh, he actually river two pair. Well, that makes sense. It just was hard to make sense of a hand that wouldn't bet the turn, but now springs to action with a bet on the river. Obviously, if the river helped his hand and improved it, made some kind of, also 5-4, I would have expected to bet again on the turn. but 10-7 or two pair in which the second pair is a 6 makes perfect sense. But I do think that against the range, since those are the only kind of hands that make sense for him to bet, I think it makes sense for me to make that call. All right, let's get some action going here. Let's find some hands. There we go. Ask and you shall receive. And I will see bet this against the mulligan. He does snap call me, which I don't love. There. I don't think I'm going to bluff him off of anything on that card. So I'll just check back. And pretty easy fold, because on the 9-4-2 rainbow flop, I don't think he's calling me with a worse hand. I think, well, yeah, there's no draws. And any vague straight draws that there were did make some kind of pair, so even if he's bluffing, he could be bluffing with the best hand. Oh, look at that for an action flop. I opened the 10-3 in the small blind. I did flop a pair of threes. I'll keep betting here. I have some equity against an ace, and he'll probably fold most hands that don't contain an ace. Queen Jack suited now on table 4, and Ace 5 in the cutoff. Both gonna be played, and while we're at it, why not 9-6 off as well? These guys seem to be playing very snug. I'll go ahead and 3-bet the Jack 9 off here. And that's too much of an action flop. I gotta just check and let the Ace 5 go. And he's opening for a smaller amount than he had. I'm just going to assume that means he's a little bit lighter. I have a little bit of playability with this hand. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet it. Check back my weak ace here for pot control and deception. And now call one bet. And just check it back here, obviously. Ugh, and he rivered the 2-pair on me. That's a little annoying. Had him set up with the flop check back. Here the king 10, pretty standard check back. And this time against Victor Luca, who's shown quite a bit of aggression, my ace jack suited is going to be good enough to call despite the early positions of our raises. I'll just fold the queen 10 here. And I'll take, no, I'm just going to check the king jack, because even if I get called, even turning a pair is not necessarily going to be good, especially not the jack. I will call this here and fold the king jack. And here, when he bets at me, I will check raise him with the idea if I get called, I can keep barreling on a diamond. And I also have the overcards. And this bet bothers me a little bit. He does call me, and it's not a very good card to continue on. I'll just check then. I don't think that I'm... And here I'll fold. There's a possibility that I may have gotten bluffed with some kind of draw, just because he bet so heavy that I would suspect that, you know, with the hand that he would have done that with, if he didn't flop a set, he would have re-raised me. And here my bluff went wrong, and I didn't pick up a turn card to continue with. In these spots, you got to think about when you make a check raise on the flop, there's added equity if you turn a good card. Certainly a diamond, but also a king or a queen would be a good card. But not only because it puts an overcard there that's good for bluffing, but it adds a gut shot to my outs as well. But that 6, once I got called, was nothing, so I really didn't have anything. So it was best to just let it go. I do have jacks right after losing that hand, so it may look like I'm a little frustrated, and so the timing of having a big hand here in the big blind against a button open is pretty good. I do get called and get a pretty safe flop. I don't like that it's so coordinated, but it's good enough to keep going, obviously. Notice that this guy did not 3-bet me that time. May have, both times he had done that, I had 4-bet him, and that may have put the skids on him a little bit. I was actually anticipating what I was going to do if he did 3-bet. Because we were deep, I was going to 4-bet again, because it puts him in a spot where, he's kind of in an uncomfortable position. I do have some playability if he does just flat call me. I do get called, the queen comes, so now I'm going to bet again, which is sort of turning my hand into a bluff. It might still have been good, but if it's not good, the queen sets itself up as a good card for me to 3-barrel. If my 5s weren't already good, and if they were good, it serves as a protection bet, so sort of a two-way bet, I guess. I don't like that term because it's very misleading, but it sort of makes sense in that spot. I guess I'll go for about 10 more minutes. That should take us to about an hour for this video, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe I'll keep going for a part 2. I'm going to start opening most stuff in the cutoff. It seems like the players simply don't 3-bet or play back as vociferously as they do in my normal games at the higher limits. So a correct adjustment is to just attack a little bit more. It's not a really good flop unless I want to set up a multi-barrel, and even that may or may not be good, so I'm just going to let it go here. And I flop 2-pair here. And I will go ahead and raise it right away, which I wouldn't do if the 3 didn't coordinate with the others, but because there's a lot of cards that can either ruin my hand or ruin my market. My market more so than my hand, so I will go ahead and raise it right away. And I'll bet with all my backdoor draws here on table 1 and my gut shot on table 3. If I get called here by Rivichico, a lot of cards are going to give me a profitable second barrel, which again, as I said earlier, should be part of the consideration. Another thing that I've noticed at lower limits, people don't check to call or check to continue often enough, so therefore you can profitably, if you're a caller of a preflop raiser and the preflop raiser checks, you can profitably bet against most players. Keep that in mind and try not to make that, try to exploit that in your opponents and try to preserve that balance for yourself. You need to have a check calling or a check raising range as the preflop raiser. Coming out of the big blind with my jacks, I'll raise the limper. Sorry about that. Just dropped my microphone. I'll squeeze with the king 9, just bad enough that I can't call, I think. It's king 10 suited, I'd probably call. I've also folded this guy's button open 2 consecutive times here on table 3, so that's an important consideration. Flopper checks, I got bottom pair. I'll go ahead and bet just because most of his holdings can't continue on this board. I got the ace-jack called from behind me by a player who seems to 3-bet a lot of suited connectors, so that's something for me to keep in mind. It is an action flop, but I have enough equity that I think I'm going to go ahead and bet here. In terms of the overcard, probably reasonable fold equity, and of course the king to make my straight. It might have been better to just check and fold because I don't have any flush possibilities. I do get called. I'm going to keep betting this one, I think. Because I think he's going to have exactly a 10 a lot of the time, sometimes some kind of straight draw himself. And also because I knew that the king was coming on the river. I want to make a bet that's going to be called by a queen and raised by a two pair. So I think it's likely he had just a 10, a hand like ace 10 there. Probably didn't have a straight draw because, the king main straight draw made a pair of kings. Jack 9 got there. And I think my sizing was such that I expected that he would call with a queen. He may have had a flush draw too. So that hand is a good demonstration, by the way, of, that wouldn't have been, on an action board like that, you don't normally just want to barrel indiscriminately. But in that case, because I had the additional equity of that gut shot, it does give me sort of that combined with the reasonably likely possibility that I'm going to get folds by the turn, make it a reasonable spot to continue. But if I didn't have that equity in drawing to the nuts there, it wouldn't have been a good spot. So I guess I'll go to the next hand that I play post flop, I suppose, and then I'll call it a video, and then I'll just I'll record it and then keep going for part 2. Could my sixes somehow be the best hand here? Look at that. Eight, 7, and pocket fours. Unyama has been folding to my small blind raises pretty consistently, so when he calls here, I'm giving him a better than average range, and won't try to mess around, even though I have a near the top of my range here, but he's been consistently folding, so I could have possibly even just checked the flop there. So, alright, I'll play this hand, the king queen suited, and then wrap up the video. Pretty standard to bet there after a limper. All right, so I guess I'll stop here. I'll keep going for part 2, like I said. So I will be back after the recording is processed. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. This is Niman Kenkre for BlueFirePoker.com.